out. We get 20 minutes of racing underway. And it is then Charles Hall who leads as they turn into turn one for the first time, with Mattel in second, Morellis third, fourth is Alistair Smart, and a good start into fifth position for Philip Brown. Doug Carter's dropped back also behind Stephen Bell, so a couple of the Class B cars there making good starts in their Radical SR3 RSXs. But for the lead of the race, it's the Mattel MC41R, driven by ex-single-seater racer Charles Hall, being chased by his team boss, Scott Mattel, who's there in the slightly newer Mattel car in second place. But here is Philip Brown, who made a good start. He was penalised in race one for exceeding track limits, so he'll be hoping to avoid that issue in this one. He's just ahead there of Steve Bell, who's up next. And behind there was the Radical PR6s of Doug Carter and of Northern Irishman Stephen Larkham. And Carter's just cut through there, up ahead of Stephen Bell. So Bell loses a spot in the Tim Gray Motorsport Radical. But the top three overall pulling clear, with Charles Hall leading the way.
Yeah, so similar situation really to earlier in the day, our first race on Alpha Live just before the lunch break, although I think it's between the two Mattels it's not necessarily done yet. Charles Hall with the measure on Scott Mattel, but they've been close in qualifying. The copper and black car certainly a little swifter coming out of bus stop and over the stripe. But we'll see how this race pans out, because Scott Mattel might be playing the long game here, being cautious on his tyres early stages.
Joe Locke did get out in the race, must have started from the pit lane, so he's at the back. Watch out for the Spire that had those problems in the assembly area. Don't think we've got Mark Boot though, unfortunately. He appears to be a non-starter. So here is Phil Brown. Now he's right on the tail of Alistair Smart and challenging as they go uphill. And they touch at a very awkward moment, and a big moment for Phil Brown. He's gone grass cutting. He's hooked up some of the North Welsh grass, but he's still right there behind Alistair Smart. That could have gone a lot worse than it did, Johnny Palmer.
Yeah, well, I've heard it's very healthy, certainly for the wildlife around here. I'm not sure it does race cars particularly good, though, and it gets wedged in the air vents and in things like brake calipers, but certainly talk about getting away with that. So far, they have managed it. Meanwhile, side by side is making some progress there. Stephen Bell on the all-red Stephen Larkham car. And Larkham had a busy first race as well, so picking off really where he left off earlier in the day. 0.9 of a second the gap between the top two leaders, Charles Hall and Scott Mattel. They come out of the tricky left-hander to end the lap over the start-finish line to start another lap then in this 20-minute race.
Yeah, it looks like that gap came down, and it did, with a faster lap for Mattel, a 1:25.3. We did a 1 minute 23.9 in race one for Charles Hall in the Superbike engined leading car that's a little bit lighter than that of Mattel, who chases with the higher booster engined machine. But here's the battle for what is fourth position between Alistair Smart and Phil Brown. It was just out of here a lap ago that we had that touch between them. Luckily, any kind of disaster was avoided. But for Phil Brown, he'd be hoping they didn't pick up too much grass there that would affect him, but he's braked really late on the inside of Alistair Smart. A big bold move there, Johnny, to grab into fourth position.
Yeah, very decisive, as you say, full-blooded, and got the space. The door, in fairness, was left wide open by Alistair Smart. I think he knew he was just about to be done like a kipper, and really it's a question of allowing that overtake to happen and see whether Philip Brown can come fighting back. But it does appear that the larger car of the two does seem to have the straight line speed. Now darting from a long way back, Joe Locke, and Mattel is out of the race again. Now, we had this situation earlier on in the day, but it's happened much earlier for second place man Scott Mattel. Josh.
Yeah, I thought I saw that Charles Hall was all alone. I wondered what may have happened, but Scott Mattel has parked the car. He was looking underneath the rear of it, and now Joe Locke is slowing as well in the Spire. He just got up to the back of the pack. He'd passed Ian Charles and maybe one or two more as well, but he's also slowing. So problems for the Spire that had those issues before the race got underway. And is Joe Locke even going to get as far as the pit lane? So reliability starting to become a factor in this Bikesports race.
Strange that, because Joe Locke was really on a charge heading into Siemens, the left-hander, the downhill left that leads onto Tom Price Straight. And somewhere between that point and the exit of the hairpin, it's all gone very, very wrong for Joe Locke's car. And yes, he is in a position to utilise the pit lane to at least get out of trouble and to avoid any sort of caution at the moment. I'm still trying to get full tabs on where Scott Mattel has ended up, but let's hope that it is somewhere safe and far enough off the circuit to be kept there, maybe covered by local yellows. Charles Hall leading Leon Morel now by nearly 7 seconds.
Yeah, so we'll have to pick up perhaps some battles a little bit through the field again in this one. So Phil Brown is up there in 3rd place, ahead of Alistair Smart after that move a lap ago, and now he's pulling clear. Doug Carter a couple of seconds back, and we threw a good battle between Smart and Carter in race 1. Stephen Bell is there in 6th position, not that far ahead of Stephen Larkham and Ian Child, so I think 6th, 7th and 8th might be a battle to look out for. But there is Scott Mattel chatting to Autosport photographer Steve Jones and 750 Motor Club photographer John Elsey, but not what he wanted to be doing at this point in the race.
I mean, they're lovely chaps, and it's a very pleasant afternoon, but you enter a race to want to finish it, and unfortunately, 2 races entered today, and neither of them has he got to the end in. Thankfully, he got a bit further in race 1, but this is the only action for Bikesports for the whole weekend, isn't it? So there aren't more races tomorrow, as you were describing. It's a sorry way to end a very otherwise pleasant weekend in North Wales. Meantime, Stephen Bell and Stephen Larkham, the scrap that we've decided to highlight quite rightly on our graphics, heading through the really rapid right-hander at Church and on towards School. This could go any which way right now.
Yeah, Stephen Bell, who was raced in RGB, as it was known then, before moving into Bikesports a couple of years ago. He's battling away then with Stephen Larkham, the Northern Irishman, and only his 2nd season of racing after racing in the Irish Road Sport Series last year. And he's got this PR6 now and is improving as the weekend goes on, I think. He finished 7th in race 1, and now he's battling for 6th position in race 2 with Steve Bell, who tended to race front engine cars when he raced in the RGB Championship, but now out in this Radical SR3 RSX that's prepared by Tim Gray Motorsport, with Larkham chasing him then down towards the hairpin for what is the 5th time in this 20-minute race. We got 15 laps out of race 1, so we'll be looking to do similar in this one. They break then up towards the left-hander at bus stop that completes the lap, and yeah, this battle continues and it's a good one to watch. Yeah,
between the 2 Steves then, heading now towards the 1st corner. Stephen Larkham doing the chasing. Steve Bell just a touch wide on the exit of turn 1 there, mounting the curb more so than he would have wished. Now, is that going to affect his exit out of the banking and on towards Church, which will surely be flat in one of these aero-dependent cars? So you fling it in and hope that the grip is there, which once again it is. Has been up until this point, but it's a moment of faith perhaps.
You can see the Class A tuned engine PR6 has got a bit more straight line speed than the SR3, but it's not quite enough, is it, for Steve Larkham to get alongside and challenge up into Rocket?
No, again, frustrating perhaps. We had a similar situation in the 5 Club Racing race as well, in that 2nd place car didn't quite have the straight line speed, but certainly was very good then when they ventured their way through Rocket and Peel and down towards Siemens. So the toe not as advantageous as it might be in saloon cars or indeed things like low cost, although diving to the inside now to go against my theory is Larkham. Little half lock up on the brakes, but that's nicely done in the end. Came from a fairly long way back. I think Steve Bell saw him coming and knew the game was up.
Looks like Charles Hall has backed his pace off. His last lap was in the 127s. I presume that's just because he's got a nice lead over Leon Morel and doesn't feel the need to push, although he was saying earlier to Andy McEwen how much he was enjoying driving around this circuit at full speed in this car, but perhaps he's now just going to make sure he can bring that car home as a race winner. Now that Stephen Larkham's got ahead of Steve Bell, he's really pulling clear, so can Larkham go after the next group of cars? He is over 10 seconds back at this stage from Doug Carter. For Alistair Smart, it looked like he was getting closer to Phil Brown, so perhaps we'll pick up on that now, because here in 3rd position is Brown, And Smart, who had started to drop away at the start of the lap, was 1.1 seconds behind. And saying he was getting closer, we haven't yet seen Alistair Smart behind Phil Brown. And why is that, I wonder?
Yeah, the gap should be about a second, shouldn't it? But it doesn't appear to be. Is that him there? Yeah, Alistair Smart coming out of the course. So maybe Smart's made a mistake on this lap. We haven't got sector times being beamed through to us on our timing screen, but it might just be a slight error or a snatch of a break, which has increased the gap to 2 or 3 seconds now from what was only a second between Brown and Smart at the start of that lap. At the end of it, yeah, it's just under 2. So a brief error for Alistair Smart, but the car is still straight and still showing that it's got plenty of power. Doug Carter, who had a very entertaining race earlier on and might have even got one position better because his progress, his pace was growing throughout the 20 minutes. Doug's currently in 5th place in the PR6. 5 and a bit seconds still the lead for Charles Hall. Leon Morel, it's tricky here to end this race and to know exactly what he needs to do. Clearly win the class, but he can probably see Charles Hall not too far in front, and Charles quite deliberately won't be pushing like crazy now with no Scott Mattel in the race.
Yeah, Leon Morel was still pushing on because he did a personal best, a 1 minute 26.65. Not as quick as the first race, about a second slower. So perhaps it's just that bit warmer again, and that means the lap time's not as quick as race 1 of the weekend. But Charles Hall completes what is lap 8 of the race. We're into the second half of it now with just over 8 minutes left on the clock. And he's lapping now consistently in the 127s. His lead gap now is, though, 4.7 seconds. So at the rate that Leon Morel is catching, if Charles Hall doesn't go any faster, that we might see a lead battle, but we'll see if then Charles Hall just picks up his pace once more. Still in 3rd position is Phil Brown. Not sure we've seen Phil on the podium in the past. His best result at Donington was a 7th. He had that penalty earlier which dropped him to 9th, but he's up in 3rd, so this is a good one. But here's the race leader. We haven't seen that much of Charles Hall in this race in the 1 litre Mattel MC41R. It may have the smallest engine, but it goes very well, Johnny.
Yeah, often in this type of racing, it's not necessarily down to cubic capacity, but how well the engine has been tuned and how light the car is that it's driving as well, that it's powering. And notably, Charles Hall has dropped off by about 2 seconds compared to his best lap of the race. So he's down in the low 127s now, when this car has been capable of a 125 earlier in the race. No immediate pressure from behind. We'll be keeping a watchful eye on those mirrors, though. But we got 2 cars from Class B, his most immediate threat. So that's not going to affect the amount of points that he scores in this second Bikesports race of the day. Still plenty of power from the car as it heads over the line. Sounds glorious. And we've got 6 minutes and 3/4 still to enjoy of it.
To put into perspective how quick Charles Hall was in race 1, he was only 2 seconds off the circuit lap record set by a Formula 3 car in the hands of Sean Walkinshaw 10 years ago. So obviously these cars a bit heavier, probably don't cost quite what a Dallara Formula 3 car costs to run back in Formula 3. But it shows, again, the privateer team that are Mattel. Okay, they've had problems with one of their cars, but they've got a really well put together car, and Charles Hall drives it really well. And just a couple of seconds off the circuit record, and a good chance that lap from race 1 will be the fastest lap of the year around this circuit.
Well, that's something of note. Let's hope that he can cling on to that for the rest of the year. Leon Morel's having an absolute whale of a time here. He's trying to be quick, don't get me wrong, but it's spectacular driving. 4-wheel drifting virtually through Church Corner, and also on the ragged edge as he headed through Peel a moment or 2 ago. Heading now down Tom Price Straight, and the car as straight as a die through there, trying to brake as late as possible. And that's not necessarily to catch Charles Hall. He's just trying to tick off faster laps, and he's at the moment been capable of a 126.6 in this race. We've just noted that maybe Stephen Larkham is trailing just a bit of bodywork on the front left. It's like a dive plane or a bit of the splitter that is working its way loose. So that will definitely be affecting how it cuts through the air, Josh?
It would seem so, although he did his personal best lap last time round.
Maybe not. Maybe he doesn't need it at all in that case.
You can hear it trailing the ground, as you say, going through the hairpin there. He did a 1 minute 28.8 on that last lap. Not quite as quick as he managed in race 1, actually. But he's still there in 6th. He's pulling clear of Stephen Larkham. He's sliding around as he comes out of the final corner. Battle for 3rd. That gap still 1.4 seconds between Phil Brown and Alistair Smart. Alistair Smart there, who won the Class A Championship last year. The driver from Hampshire. But there's our leader, Charles Hall, who's now only 3.8 seconds behind Leon Morelli, still sliding his Radical SR3 around this car that's run by Valor Racing. Leon is a 40-year-old carpet shop owner from Nottingham who started car racing just 3 seasons ago. He won the championship back in 2021.
Oh, spin for Alistair Smart. Now, was there some contact with Doug Carter? Because I saw Doug exiting stage left there, and the two of them, well, weren't particularly together. Maybe Doug has had to take avoiding action because Smart spun on his own. But, yeah, at the start of the lap, there's about 6 seconds between them. So spin all on his own for Alistair Smart, we're hearing, from 4th position, and he has lost that place now to Doug Carter, who was minding his own business in the earlier race today, and that patience was rewarded with places gained. Leon Morel pushing on as well. Headlights on now, we all know what that means in motorsport language. He means business, and he can see Charles Hall a bit further up the road now. The fact that you can see your rival will give you even more of a shot at the arm.
Remember, he was 30 seconds behind in race 1. He's only 3 seconds behind with a couple or 3 laps to go here in race 2. The pair are 20 seconds ahead of Phil Brown, who's obviously now well clear in 3rd from Doug Carter, who's up ahead of now of Alistair Smart. So that was also a change for what is 2nd place in Class A. And then Stephen Larkham in 6th. Stephen Bell has got himself, Ian Charles has closed in. So for 7th and 8th positions, there's a potential positional change before the end of this race, which sees Alistair Smart in 5th position. He's 4 seconds behind Doug Carter after that spin just on the latest lap of the race. And some issue tracked up the top of the circuit. There's a bit of brake lock-up, I think. Once the leader crosses the line, I think with 2 laps to go for Charles Hall. And Leon Morel continues in 2nd. The gap goes out to 4 seconds because all of a sudden Charles Hall punches in a 1 minute 25. So I think he showed all along that that pace was there if he needed it. Morel still sliding that SR3 around, who's there in 2nd place. And now what's happened, Stephen Larkham, who was in 6th, now has he parked his car up with Scott Mattel's, or has he had a bit of an issue there, Johnny?
Well, let's just take it at face value and just think that he's broken down. The car, maybe with no pace. 27 has already parked there, remember. Scott Mattel, who was 2nd at the time, must have been about 10 or 15 minutes ago now, but that is starting to turn into a Bikesports graveyard, unfortunately, at the top end of the circuit. There's contact coming out of the final corner as well, and that was the 24 car of Ian Charles getting hooked up with the 86 car of Stephen Bell, who you can see right now parked broadside, being covered by local yellows. Still 1 minute and 27 seconds left on the clock, and Steve can recover that moment, thankfully, before the race leader, Charles Hall, arrives on the scene.
I think he was doing a bit of a bow as he jumped to his team as he got back going. I don't think there was contact. Ian Charles was very close to him and managed to avoid contact, I believe. Those two were battling. I think Ian Charles had got past. Stephen Bell tried to come up the inside and then had that spin. But, yeah, that was very close to what could have been quite a large accident, actually. So there may only be 7 cars running, but we almost had a drama there towards the end. But it's the last lap now for Charles Hall. And now he's got a 6-second lead because he's done another 1 minute 25. Still a long way off the pace from race 1, but he's still much quicker than Leon Morel, who's there in 2nd place. Phil Brown only now crosses the line. He's on for a podium, which I think would be a first for him in Bikesports, and for 4th position. Doug Carter's being recaught by Alistair Smart, and that's for a 2nd position within class, so that's quite important if Alistair Smart can regain that position. But for Charles Hall, I suspect he probably would have preferred a battle with his mate Scott, wouldn't he, rather than have this sort of an easy drive, but it's all good for the championship, I suppose.
Well, that's true. A nice big points haul again for Class A victory, but it has been a race where he's been afforded the chance to wind back the wick and maybe drive at 80 or even 70% at times. A lot of the lap times more recently have been 2 seconds away from his best in this race, and we know he went even faster for the first race of the day. He's done all he needs to do, though, and heading into bus stop now, it'll be another victory for Charles Hall, Josh.
That's 3 in a row now in Bikesports. He won the second race at Donington. He's won both races today here at Anglesey. For Leon Morrell, it's a similar case in Class B. He won the second race at Donington and now has won 2 today at Anglesey. He takes second overall this time, 6.5 seconds behind the winner, Charles Hall. And we wait for the rest. In third position should be Phil Brown, which will be a great result for him if he can hang on this last lap. He turns his way now up towards the final corner at bus stop, and it is a third position overall for Phil Brown after some good moves early on. For fourth position, Doug Carter hangs on ahead of Alistair Smart, and then in sixth position will be Ian Childs, and seventh will be Stephen Bell. So hopefully we'll have more Bikesports out as we head to Croft in 4, 5, 6 weeks' time, I think. So a few weeks away till our next round at Croft, and hopefully, like I say, we'll see more cars there. Snetterton, Brands Hatch and Silverstone will round off the season for the 2023 750 Motor Club Bikesports Championship. Here are the results, though, from round 4, and it was Charles Hall who won by 6.5 seconds over Leon Morrell and Phil Brown in third. Fourth for Doug Carter, ahead of Alistair Smart, who had a spin. Sixth for Ian Childs, and the last finisher in seventh place, Stephen Bell. Retirement with problems for Steve Larkham, Joe Locke and Scott Mattel, who were the 10 starters. Action not just here on the circuit, Anglesey, but also in the sea as well. That seems like quite a good thing to do today, Johnny.
It's a good way to cool off, isn't it? Because it's pretty warm in our commentary box being on the third floor, and even hotter, clearly, in the race cars. But yeah, if you're out on the open sea, a chance to soak up the rays, but at a much more comfortable temperature. They are missing a cracking day's racing, though, I will say. So let's hope that they've got in the diary to visit Anglesey tomorrow at the very least.
One more race today to look forward to, which is the Calm All Porsche Trophy. That'll be a 15-minute sprint race. Just to remind you that racing begins at about 9:30 tomorrow after one qualifying session, so we'll be coming on air around then, and we'll see racing for everything we've seen today, bar bike sports and road sports, but we'll be joined by the Club Enduro Championship. Andy McEwen is down in Parc Fermé with the winners from the bike sports.
So the second bike sports race of the day, then it's another victory for Charles Hall. Charles thinks he's finished second because he's parked in front of the second place board, but you're not giving anyone else a chance to win a race, are you? It looked like that you had that one pretty much in hand.
It's a shame Scott went out because that was going to be a handful, but to be honest, we tried a few different things, just to keep improving, and this time it was Leon. I was sort of having a look in the mirrors, and then I saw Leon there, and I thought, yeah, he's going well, he's keeping me there, so well done to Leon, and bit of a shame for my teammate, but yeah, over the moon, and I've absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it.
I was going to ask you about that mid-phase of the race then, because it did look as though Leon was closing in on you. Were you managing the situation? Was there an issue?
I just went a little bit, tried something different on the tyres, and once the pressure was off with Scott, the tyres just dropped off a little bit, and then I saw Leon there, and he didn't come back in as quick as I wanted, so he was definitely on my tail. I'm like, got to get my head down.
Perfect weekend for you. Do you know what the issues are, by the way, with Scott's car? Was it the same problem, do we think, that he had in the earlier race?
I don't know, actually. I saw him give the slow down sign, so I knew he was definitely out. So, yeah, shame for that, but cracking weekend and well pleased.
Excellent stuff. So, a great result there for Charles Hall, second win of the weekend. Now, where's Leon Morrell got to? Oh, there he is, sorry, right in front of me. Leon, congratulations, second place finish for you there, but as Charles was just saying, you had him worried there for a bit.
The car was absolutely mega then. Like, sometimes they just click, and that thing was fast. Track's obviously dropped pace, I think, but I was absolutely wringing its neck. Loved that, really enjoyed it. Great competition. Mega chuffed to see my teammate Phil third overall. So yeah, really good day. I mean, sunny conditions, dialed weather, live coverage, and the usual 750 Motor Club goodness. So yeah, no, really enjoyable. Can't do one piece, and we're coming home with a smile on our face, aren't we? So.
That is the main thing, absolutely. Congratulations, Leon, on that second place. Let's have a word with your teammate, shall we, then? Because Philip Brown, second within Class B again, which is the same result as he had within the class earlier on. But this time, Philip, you're on the overall podium. Not bad.
Fantastic, yeah. Rookie season last year. So, yeah, first podium, so really excited.
I'll tell you what.
Without his problems.
Well, go on then, do tell.
Well, I had contact with Alistair at one point, but we survived it, so hope he's okay about it.